So let's move into this area now we're talking about life coaching and how this is more than just sex or picking up girls, and it's a lot more than that. And one of the issues is identity, like you're an Asian guy, I'm an Asian guy. I was raised in Canada, you were raised in America. How does being Asian affect the way that you interact with women in America? Or does it? Or maybe you can even talk from the perspective of your Asian clients. How does being Asian affect getting better in dating?
I think it's one of those things that in our industry we like to kind of gloss over because at least in Western society it is a disadvantage. Don't let anybody tell you that being Asian in America and dating is as easy as being a white guy. It's not impossible, obviously, but I would say it's on the same level as white collar job for black guy. If you're very talented, you're going to get a job. I mean, our president's a black guy, so obviously it can be done. But everything else being equal, if you're competing with a white guy, you're going to lose. And it's not fair, it's not right, but that's just how life is. I guarantee that if I go in and I dye my hair black again and I put on like a suit and I go into a job interview for a IT computer job and I go up against a white guy and we have identical resumes, I'm going to win. Because of stereotypes. It's not right. Even if we're not identical, even if he's slightly better, I might still win.
Yeah.
We have stereotypes, and I think everyone's got stereotypes, and you can either use them to your advantage, and you can work against the disadvantages, and you can mitigate a lot of the disadvantages, or you can cry about it, and that benefits nobody. And so with dating with Asian men, there's dating kind of in your own culture, and then there's of course dating interracially. I think in both scenarios, one of the big disadvantages is that we're taught and we're brought up culturally not to rock the boat. We're brought up not to be aggressive, not to be alpha as we call it, or not to be dominant, not to be a leader. We're kind of brought up to be like seen, not heard. Just not rock the boat and not say anything, and just not be the loud guy in the room. And that's how I was brought up, and that's how most of my clients were brought up. And unfortunately, that's a very big disadvantage in dating. And I know even among Asian cliques, even among Asian circles, that one Asian guy that's loud is usually the guy that's dating the most women, even among the Asians. So it's definitely something that transcends culture. Unfortunately, if you don't happen to be the lucky guy that happens to, then you're among everybody else that's just kind of fighting for scraps or nothing at all. And I think that's a big thing, is just is trying to start to assimilate the mindset of going after what you want and being unashamed of that, whether it's an Ivy League degree or whether that's a woman. Being unashamed of going after that, and in this case too, being unashamed of your sexuality, being okay with that. And that was a big transition point for me and for a lot of my students, and that's some of the things that we have to go through.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Like in coaching in Asia, like in Asia itself, I thought I would find a lot of guys who had the same stumbling blocks or sticking points mentally. And because I was doing really high-end coaching, one-on-one for like, at the time, up to between 15 and 25,000 Singapore dollars, which is like 10 to 15,000 US dollars. I was getting a different type of client from boot camps. Like I was getting guys who were raised in the top private schools. Their parents have hedge funds or private equity firms. And what ended up happening was like they didn't have these problems because they came from that top 1% of society, which is this Asian elite, but they were still totally Asian. Like but they represented Asia to the world, in a way. And what I noticed is that most of Asia has the Asian masses mindset, which is, and I just like as a student, I have my Ph.D. in Asian culture, so I've studied this for most of my adult life. The history of Asia and the history of China, especially for the past 3,000 years or so, that the ruler's mentality and what he's taught as a ruler's philosophy and their ideology is really very different from what you want the farmer or the potential rebel in the countryside to think. And you want to keep them passive. You want to keep them as asexual, as possible. So you're not going to get testosterone-filled rebellion. And
interesting.
So the emperors who had like 300 concubines, they were just starting wars and had these massive navy campaigns into Europe and all that. Those guys were they were pretty alpha. It's hard to get more alpha than the emperor. So it's not like it's. So I want to make sure that people in Asia, they don't want to take on something that's not Asian. Like they don't want to say, hey, our Asian culture is not good enough, so we're going to go learn from these white people or the Western culture. What I'm saying is that that's not actually what they think is Asian culture. It's not actually Asian. It's just the Asian masses mindset. And like passivity, being a pushover, just not speaking up, and not being comfortable with sexuality. These are all things that will really help you when you're trying to attract women. And they're just as Asian as it is, like, as rice. It's just as Asian.
Right.
And you pointed out two different types of limitations, I guess, as being an Asian, or disadvantages. And one is like from the outside, like how other people perceive you as an Asian person. So this is something that's imposed upon you. That it's going to be much harder for us to change how other people perceive Asians. But then there's what comes from the inside. Like what you can change, what you have direct control over, like you were saying, the passivity and the pushoverness, and not speaking up, not being talkative. And these are all things that you can aggressively go at on your own and see a lot of effort. I mean, that's mainly you doing that work.
Right.
And I'm just telling people, like just like you, I'm saying, like when the outside pressure. So the inside stuff is what we as coaches can do a lot of help with. I mean, give them a lot of help with. But the outside pressures, that's depending on the society you're in. And I'm thinking like maybe 10, 15 years down the road, or definitely by the time our kids, grow up, but maybe 10, 15 years, the Asian stereotype will be like sexy, even like sexy Latino guy or something. Because of DJ Fuji, when he gets his products out, it's going to change the way the world thinks about Asian men now.
I hope so. I think we're already seeing, though, a big thing, and I'm sure you've noticed this too. We're already seeing the erosion of the Asian beta stereotype. We've seen it in movies like Rain, where for the first time you've had essentially most cultures consider Rain a sex symbol, and that was a big, big thing, because before Rain, what did we have? Like the best we had was Mr. Harold from Harold and Kumar. I forget his name. Right? And he's attractive, but he wasn't even considered a sex symbol. If anything, he was considered like a comedy symbol, right?
Yeah.
And before that, all we had is like the best we had was Bruce Lee. Yeah. And then William Hung came around and ruined 40 years of stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
And but now we're finally seeing, in Rain you had an interracial couple. With Rain and the reporter. You had that with Flash Forward. We're seeing it more and more, and I think that's kind of a sign that there is progress in those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot here. And just being in Asia, too, it helps spending some time in Asia, because then it trains your mind, like just in terms of what you can handle what you can change on the inside. Because I'm seeing... on the billboards, I see Asian models. Not so much in Singapore, but definitely in China. A lot of Asian models on the covers of the magazines. And, so instead of seeing white people as being what's raised up as the role model, I'm seeing some Asian faces. But I notice that in Hollywood, when I go back to the West, there's a lot more of a crossover now. One of the things that you'll notice as time goes on is that if somebody has an obvious disadvantage, and he has the will to succeed. When he does succeed, he'll be that much stronger than the guy who didn't have those disadvantages, just because he had to overcome that adversity. So, like, if you're a smaller guy, I'm 5'7", so in America I'm shorter than average, and I just figured if I'm 20% shorter than the average guy, then I need to be 20% stronger or 20% bigger. So I'd go to the gym and try to get that just to compensate, And so one of the things in America is if they assume that you're asexual, then you can go a little bit over the line from the average
absolutely.
guy. And,
absolutely.
Yeah. So one of those things is like compensation, and it's not just compensating you to get you to the average, but now because you've had that skill and you've already had the experience in getting yourself to make up that difference, to make up your disadvantage. Now you can just keep the momentum going and go over and make it into an advantage.
Yeah. There's actually an interesting reframe. One of the guys asked me, when we do inner game, a big part of inner game is reframing, especially your limiting or your negative beliefs. Mm-hmm. Well, one guy asked me, he said, Fuji, how do I reframe this? Because Asian men are considered unattractive to non-Asian women. And he gave me a list of studies, and I already knew those studies because I had read them. And it was a very difficult reframe because he said, there's hard evidence here. that shows that we are not as attractive. So how am I supposed to believe that I'm just as attractive as the next guy, white guy, if there's a study showing I'm not? And what I told him is that what you have to look at is that study is not showing causation. It's showing correlation. That study is showing broad correlation. And while it may appear that what you're seeing is that Asian men are not attractive to, say, white women, right, for the sake of this example, if you really get down and look at this under scrutiny, what you realize is it has nothing to do with the Asian thing. It has everything to do with the traits, especially the traits that are associated with Asian men. That would be like saying black men can't be successful. We have a black president, right? It's not so much and there is going to be a stereotype, but it's not so much the Asian part as it is the stereotypes that are traditionally associated with Asian men. And if Asian men couldn't be attractive, it just genetically we weren't attractive, then you wouldn't see the rise of Asian sex symbols. You wouldn't see rain. You wouldn't see like these guys that are coming out and women. There's a guy named Daniel Henney. He
was in Wolverine and
yeah. He played Agent Zero in Wolverine, right? And girls are swooning over this guy, and for the first time we're seeing more of those trends. That couldn't happen if genetically we were inferior in that sense. Yeah, he's a good-looking guy, but Rain's not particularly good-looking if you look at him. Like his facial structure, he's not traditionally good-looking. Okay, so he's not super short, but he just works out a lot, and he knows how to dress and everything. He's like Usher. Usher's not attractive either. He just knows how to dance and he knows how to dress, right? But we're starting to see that, and what that's showing us is that the causation here is all off, and it's not the Asian thing, it's the traits. I don't care who you are. If you're beta and you're submissive and you're passive and you don't go after what you want, you're going to be seen as unattractive. Right. And that has nothing to do with the Asian thing. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing that we're starting to kind of transition into.
Yeah, there's a ton more research on. I mean, I know all the. I'm pretty sure I know all the research that shows that Asian guys are disadvantaged. And there's even more research on how the personality traits are what attract women primarily. So that's a great way to take that because it's so true. I mean, if you take all the research, I mean, a great summary of this was in David Buss's book Evolution of Desire, where he went over like what do women want, and looks was just one small part of it. And even like in terms of sexiness, like if you think of George Clooney, again, not a guy who's not classically, like, he doesn't have a symmetrical face, he's not classically attractive physically, but it's just there's the sex appeal to them because of their personality. And that's really what women are after. And one great way, I mean, like there are also studies that show that height is a disadvantage in getting income and in career advancements and in attractiveness to women. And, you're shorter than me, so you should probably know this better than I do.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of the research on height, too, and there's something that I clearly cannot change. I actually looked into height enhancement surgery, and it was just extremely painful and invasive.
I know, I have too.
Oh, there's no way. That's not worth it.
Yeah,
I'm not putting screws in my knees and stuff. So, so then I had to reframe that, and that was my first big reframe. It wasn't the Asian thing yet, because the Asian thing was just too big. But the height I could deal with because I was like 20% shorter than the average. But I realized that yes, if I were 6'2", I would probably end up making more money. But that doesn't mean that I can't make more money. So I had this idea, like I looked at the NBA. It's in Toronto. The Toronto Raptors had this guy called Muggsy Bogues, who was 5'2", and he was their point guard. And he had this advantage where the guys couldn't guard him because he was so low to the ground. They couldn't even steal the ball from him because they couldn't even touch it. They'd have to do squats to get to the ball. So he's just going between these guys' legs. Well, not that much, but like between the guys. And so there's an advantage. There's always an advantage, even in fighting. Like if you're a short guy and this guy has a big reach, if you can get inside his reach, you can do some serious damage real fast because your reach is shorter. I mean, he can't. It's harder for him to defend against you. So
lower center of gravity and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, then I just started looking in athletics for guys who had physical disadvantages, like he had like only one ball, when he's wins the Tour de France or something like that. Like somebody who's always overcoming adversity and seeing that. And nowadays you see Manny Pacquiao killing it. And there's just so many examples of guys who are shorter or Asian in that case, who are not just compensating, but I would say like overcompensating or going past their disadvantage to make it into an advantage. And another thing I had to do was reframe the way I see the world to accept my belief. So even if the whole world is against me, like they all just like act consciously saying taller guys are better, we're going to hire taller guys, and they just keep going around doing that, and I can't change their minds unless, you know, when I would just meet them, right? So instead, I need to change my mind so that I'm not affected by that kind of thinking, because I know that what attraction is it's unconscious, and women aren't going to sit around and logically deduce who they're going to sleep with. You know, they don't have a list and say, well, most of them don't, unless they're gold diggers. You know, have a list and say he meets this height requirement and he has this race. You know, they're not going to do that. They just even if they're consciously doing that a little bit, because attraction is unconscious, they're just going to be overcome by their sex drive and like, oh man, that guy's sexy. I don't know why he is, but there's something about him. And I used to hear that girls say that about me. Like, well, their friends would tell me that, you know, people keep talking about you. They're like, what's with David? There's just something about him. Like, because I'm not good looking. I'm not, you know, I don't have any money compared to the other guys. And it was just because, I think partly because of the mental thing where I tried to inundate my mind with images of shorter guys who are killing it in the world. Like, I just put them all over my wall. I'd watch these movies of Tom Cruise beating up all these guys, you know. And it was just become like a fact of life for me that even if you're short, you can win. And in fact, the shorter you are, and if at the podium where the guy with the gold medal is shorter than all the other guys, you know he's that much better because he had to overcome that much adversity. So I started telling girls that, like, I got a girl who said to me in New York, she's like, you're too short for me. Like right off the bat, I just walked up, and this was in a boot camp, and I just a reflex. I said, well, you know, it takes a shorter man to handle a stronger woman. You know, and she's like, that's true. And she stood up and said, here, sit down with me. So it's just, as long as it doesn't affect you, I mean, there's always exceptions in every field. And why can't you be one of them?
Right. I guess the biggest example for us as Asians is, especially in Western society, is the analogy I always bring up is Asians come to America and English is their second language. And imagine you were to tell your mom, hey, Mom, English is my second language, so I flunked English. Or even I got a B in English. Like, I got a B in English, but it's okay because English is my second language. I shouldn't have to compete with this white guy who's grown up here his whole life. And no Asian mom is going to be like, yeah, that's fine. That's totally cool. You know what I mean? She'll tell you, study harder then. Study longer. Do whatever. We'll enroll you in tutoring. We'll do whatever it takes, but that's unacceptable. Yes. And that mindset of, I don't care what your disadvantage is. I don't care what your excuse is. Make it happen. That mindset is, I think, what makes people successful, and it's what allows people to overcome those odds and those adversities.
Yeah. So use the Asian mindset to your advantage.